Hello and welcome. My name is Amanda and today I have for you the first ever book review on my channel. So I was asked a couple of weeks ago by Erik from Breakeven Books if I would like to be a part of a book tour, and I agreed because it's something I've never been a part of. So I thought it would be a lot of fun to join this. And the book that we are kind of helping to promote this week is The Forbidden Warriors by Moud Adel. And it is kind of, the way Erik pitched it to me was a mix between Hunger Games and I think he said Ready Player One. But for me, it was kind of more of a mix between Divergent and Ready Player One. But I have a little synopsis here because I'm not very good at explaining books, so I'm just going to read to you what this is about and then kind of go into a little bit of a rating using my rating system and just kind of explore the different elements that this book had and what I liked and what I thought needed a bit more work. But basically this is a fictional world, or fantasy world, that was created by the author, obviously. But the world itself is called Mastoperia, and it's a hidden continent with 4 factions divided and suspicious of each other, with a history of unresolved wars, each grounding themselves in their own unique culture and magical power. The Forbidden Warriors, the only force powerful enough to keep the factions from destroying one another. The secret to their power is a mystery, but the only way to hold on to it is by passing the power to a new generation every 2.5 centuries. As that time has arrived, each faction must offer a candidate to become the next generation of the Forbidden Warriors, but only one can be the leader. In a race for that leadership position, 4 candidates and their teams travel across a world mysterious to them to hunt artifacts they know nothing about. The mission is not easy, their goals are not aligned, and the truth is far bigger than they could have imagined. A challenge none were ready for. Will they choose their own interests, their factions, or defy all that they know for the sake of their world? So this was a pretty cool world, and I think a lot of the reason why I feel like it's pretty close in some elements to Divergent is just because of the word factions. There's 5 factions in Divergent, and there are 4 different factions in this book. But I'm going to start out just with my rating system. I haven't done an update on this in quite some time. It does mimic G's over at Book Roast quite a bit. I used a lot of her system as inspiration. But the first thing I rate a book based on is the atmosphere. And for me, this is the world building. And like the synopsis said, you have 4 different factions, and each of them have their own unique magical abilities, so to say. And I thought that was a really intriguing concept. And I want to know like how these factions that live on the same continent have their own magic system and how that kind of came to be. So in this, I will say that it took me a little bit to get into the book and kind of understand what each faction was about and what each kind of magic system was about. The author does have 2 prequel novels. One is called, I think it's called The War, which is about the war that led to the suspicion and the kind of mistrust between the factions. And the other is called The Seed, and that explains one of the magical abilities of a faction that is from it's not a planet, I guess the territory is what I'll call it, called Lunar. So I did want a bit more world building in the beginning just because it took me a little bit to get into the story and to kind of figure out how each magical ability kind of manifested itself and how it was used. So you've got the gosh, I don't remember what the plural is for this, but you've got the territory of Lunar, and these are your pretty technologically savvy individuals. They have these different colored seeds in their bodies that kind of, I guess, express different parts of their bodies. You've got a blue seed, which I know is for kind of the thought process and things like that. You've got a red seed, which is for emotions. There's this black seed, which is kind of for protection. It kind of, when you brush it, it can build an armor around the body. And there's other seeds, but those three were the main seeds that were prevalent in the story. So they're the ones I know the most about. Then you also have the territory of Kala, which is a really interesting territory. I think this was one of my favorites, but they have the ability, I guess kind of like Doctor Strange, to open different gates. So they write the number of these gates over their chest, and they open and have different abilities. So they can control like metals and woods and different things like that. It's kind of like elements and materials. Only the, like, I guess purest of this race have the ability to open gates past gate 5. So you've got gate 6 and gate 7, which are a mystery to most people unless you can open it. Also, they don't have a time limit in between when they can open a gate, whereas the rest of the population, they typically have to wait 30 minutes in between opening a different gate. You also have the territory of Avaret, which I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that properly. But these people are able to bond with these creatures called majestics, which are very powerful magical beings. And when they, I guess, bond with the majestic, they absorb into their skin as a tattoo, and they can kind of call on that majestic at any point in time. So they're just like completely tattooed. A lot of the main majestics are like elephants, tigers, beetles, scarab beetles, gorillas, snakes, things like that. And they all have their different functions and kind of abilities within themselves. And then you also have the territory of Delphia, which are the magical ability that people have is being able to see the future, but they can only see futures that are linked to their own future. And it's not just like, I know that at 2 o'clock I'm gonna have a package arrive. It's all the different possibilities of the different like thought processes and decisions that can be made. So it's not just black and white. You have to read between the lines and kind of be able to sift through the different possibilities like that. So we start out the book with 4 people, so a member from each faction, coming to the Forbidden City and being told that they have to go on this quest to find these hidden artifacts in, I think it was Earth, but I don't remember, because when they got to this land, the land, like the, I guess, continents had different names. But it's a land that you're not allowed to travel to because it's a land without magic, or without known magic. And so obviously if you go there, you have to be very careful to not expose yourself to the people. So they're told that they have to come back in a certain amount of time to the Forbidden City with 3 other faction members of their choosing, and then they will go out and find these artifacts. So I'm kind of going out of order here. So things get shaken up a bit within the teams, and they have to go out and find these artifacts. So that kind of explains the atmosphere a little bit. Like I said, I wanted to learn more about it, which I think with the, oh gosh, what are those called? The prequels, the novellas. I think that will give me a better sense of the world as a whole. I just wish, because this is the first book in the series, that it had done more of that world building and didn't rely so heavily on the prequel novels, because I didn't know about them before going into this. So I definitely had a lot of questions for Erik as we were doing our buddy read, because he did read, I believe, both of the prequels, so he was able to kind of answer the questions that I was having. So then I go into characters. So like I said, there were technically 4 of each character from each territory. We had our main characters, which I did get this on my Kindle. I don't have like an actual copy. This is just the document that Erik sent me. So you've got, and there's terms or teams and phonetics in the back, which was super helpful once I found that, because I couldn't pronounce like anybody's name. But you had Evelyn from Lunar, Rondai from Kala, Jihav from Avaret, and Kawan from Delphia. And within that, you also had, I've got to kind of jump around a bit. So you've got Inyo from Lunar, Cilia from Lunar, and Naradia from Lunar. Then from Kala, you had Jasmina, Rolikan, and Rin. And then from Avaret, there was Bofrat, Salvanra, and Maringrad. And then from Delphia, there was Milani, Turquan, and Alinda. So within this, you had Jihav and Salvanra were boyfriend and girlfriend. Also, Cilia and Inyo, I believe, were engaged. And Bofrat and Maringrad were brothers. And Jasmina and Rondai were brother and sister as well. So you've got some relationships, which I felt like the sibling relationships were really good. They felt real and authentic to me. But there was one relationship that sparked up that I'm not going to tell you who it's between, because that would be spoilers, that felt a little forced. Also, I felt like the pacing of this book was a bit off. So they spend over a month in the outside world, and the pacing of the story felt like it was only maybe a week or a week and a half that this time went on. So really, these relationships had time to manifest and like become solidified relationships, but it didn't feel that way within the story. So a lot of them felt to me superficial, but really what the author was trying to portray was that they were these like concrete, like good standing relationships, like of people that you would want to continue to have a relationship with after this challenge is gone. So for me, the character dynamics weren't quite where I wanted them to be, or what I had felt while reading the story versus what the author was trying to portray. But I do think they have a lot of potential to grow in the next books. I don't know if this is supposed to be a trilogy or a series, but if I can find that out, I'll let you know. I am going to leave a link to this book on Goodreads down in the description below, as well as the link on Amazon for where you can purchase it if you're interested in it. So characters left a little bit wanting for me, but I am excited to see how those dynamics progress later. So the next, I guess, category that I use to rate books is my overall enjoyment of the book. This book I had a lot of fun with. Even though there were some problematic areas, there were some things that I needed a bit more of. I did think that it was a very kind of unique take on this fantasy kind of just not really dystopian, but fantasy sci-fi type of world. And I just had a lot of fun with it. It was really nice to read with Erik. Also, one thing that like really is good for me enjoyment wise is short chapters, because I feel like I can just keep reading and keep reading. I think for the most part, Erik and I tried to split it up into like 50 pages a day. Some days we hit it, some days we didn't. But these chapters were just perfect for me because it follows one of a different main character, I believe, was the chapter heading each time, and their team. And it was, you know, like, I feel like most were under 10 pages, which were just perfect because it was nice bite-sized chunks and you could continue on, and just, it was really easy to find a rhythm. So I thought that was great. So then the next category I rate books based on is format. I don't really have a preference, I don't think, for format. I read ebooks, I read physical books, I listen to audiobooks. Basically, I'll consume a book in any format you give me. So this one, it's not the official e-reader copy. It was a file that was downloadable onto, I think Mobi is the format. So it was okay for me, but I think getting the actual Kindle download will be a lot better. I guess another thing I struggled with this is not the book itself, but I think the format, because there is a map and there's also the teams and phonetics. And it's not, if you bookmark it on Kindle, it's easy to flip back and forth too, but I think it would have been easier maybe as a physical book. So I would say that maybe that might have led to not as great of an experience, but honestly, that was, I guess that's my choice to read it as a Kindle book versus a physical book. So I can't really say like my experience wasn't great because of that, just because that's what was available to me. I think it would be really nice to listen to this as an audiobook just because the names are difficult to pronounce. So maybe when the next books in the series come out, I'll listen to this book as an audiobook just to have a refresher. So we'll see. But I think overall the format was pretty decent for what it was. The next category I have is intrigue. And for me, a lot of intrigue is kind of, it parallels enjoyment a lot, but also intrigue for me is, do I even want to keep reading this book? I think it helps having it as a buddy read, but also I feel like if Erik and I didn't buddy read this book, I would have wanted to pick the book up and continue reading. I wanted to know what happened to the characters. I was invested in the story, so it did have that intrigue factor for me. The next is, I always do these in ABC order, that way I don't forget anything. So logic. Logic for me, I think, was a little bit lacking just because, like I said, I didn't have that world building from the beginning. I didn't know how the magic systems work, and I don't necessarily need to know like in-depth nitty-gritty, but it would be nice to know maybe there was this phenomenon that happened, or like these people get theirs from eating this special food, or like drinking from this well, or it's an implanted. I think that would have been easier for me to maybe compartmentalize how you can have one world with 4 different magic systems. And that would have been nice to have in this first novel, just kind of to build that up, versus having to rely on the prequels or the novellas to know that information. So moving on from logic, we then have plot. And like I said about plot, I felt like the pacing was a little strange. So it was nice to kind of have the time with the characters, picking out their team members. Some got more time than others. and you got to learn a little bit more about their magic at that point. You got to learn a little bit more about their relationships and kind of build those. But the focus on each character wasn't equal, so I felt like I knew a lot more about two or mostly three of the characters versus one of the characters. So that would have been helpful. I also felt like the pacing of the story overall was off. So with the first challenge, it was pretty in-depth, and how they acquired the artifact, it took time and consideration, and it was an actual challenge. Whereas with the last, whoops, there's a little puppy sniffing around with the, hi Boone, with the last three challenges, it just seemed really, really easy. So I would have liked a bit more on that, and just kind of pacing would have been a little better had maybe each challenge been equally easy or not. Sorry about that, there's a little puppy. Also, I think it would have been nice had the first book focused solely on the 4 challenges, whereas at the end, they come back with the artifacts, and then the second challenge is put in place, and that begins and kind of ends in a way, and it kind of leaves a bit of a cliffhanger to set up the second book. So I would have really liked if the first book had solely focused on the 4 challenges, and if we could have gone in depth into what it took for each team to acquire that. So I think that would have been really good, and I'd like to see that more as the story progresses. Just kind of if Maud could maybe take his time a little bit more and just set it up just a little better. And then the last category I use to rate is writing style. This is kind of important, but kind of not important to me. I like to have a writing style that isn't too fluffy and flowery, but also a writing style that's not too dense. I don't want to go through it and have to like have a dictionary by me, because the author is just like, we're gonna use this term that's synonymous with this that nobody uses in real language, but I want to use. So I do think that Moud's, I don't know if it's modern Moud. I hope that someone can correct me down in the comments below. But I thought his writing style was really good. I didn't think it was too simplistic for a first full-length novel author. I thought just his diction was really good. I'm also glad that because this is a fantasy sci-fi novel, and even though the names were a bit tricky to pronounce, he didn't have all this other, I guess, descriptions of the world that were just like, oh boy, I don't even know what I'm reading at any point. Like, for example, the lunar, I think it's Lunardis or Lunardians, I don't remember, but they have seeds, so it could have been something so much more complex, and I'm really glad that it wasn't, because it made for a much more enjoyable read, just to be able to visualize these powers and these people and things like that. So overall, I am going to save my rating. If you would like to know how I rated this book, I do have a link to my Goodreads down in the description below. You can see it there. So I do think this book has a lot of potential, and I did really enjoy it. I'm really looking forward to reading the rest of the series and definitely diving into those novellas so I can learn a lot more about this world. I don't know when I'm going to do that, but hopefully it will be soon, maybe the beginning of 2020, we shall see. But this is definitely a series that I'm going to keep on my radar, and Moud as well, for an author just to kind of look out for and kind of follow his writing journey as he publishes more works. And I just really can't wait to see his writing style grow a lot more. So I hope you guys enjoyed this kind of in-depth rating system book review. If this book sounds intriguing to you, please do let me know down in the comments below. I would love to know your thoughts if you do read it, and just other things like that. So please chat with me down in the comments, and I will speak with you there until my next video. Bye.